An angel's message changed everything. The secret to overcoming the crisis in your business. The angel who saved my business. The answer you need. Have you ever stopped to think about how a single word, a decision, or even a vision can completely transform the course of your life and your company? Many believe that the answer to their challenges lies in numbers, strategies, or even luck. But what if I told you that some of the biggest turning points in the lives of entrepreneurs started with something much more extraordinary? Encounters with the divine, moments where angels brought messages that opened doors, brought solutions and rekindled hope. Stories that show that behind every challenge there is a greater force, ready to guide anyone willing to listen. The first story I want to tell you is that of Marcos, a textile businessman. He was facing a terrible crisis, sales falling, debts accumulating, and, to make matters worse, a feeling of incapacity that made him question whether he should give up everything. One night, after a particularly difficult day, he knelt in the small living room of his home and prayed like never before. Marcos didn't know that that moment of despair was, in fact, the beginning of a great transformation. As he slept, he had a dream, or so he thought. He saw an angel who, in a calm voice, said, "Marcos, you are planting in the wrong soil. Move your seed and growth will come." When I woke up, it seemed enigmatic, but deeply real. For days he reflected on those words, until he realized that he was insisting on saturated markets, while ignoring growing opportunities in smaller, underexplored niches. He changed his strategy, focused on sustainable products, and, in a matter of months, saw his sales soar. For Marcos, this was not just an insight, it was divine intervention. What seemed like the end turned into a new beginning. And what about Carla, a food businesswoman who had been trying to expand her restaurant chain for years without success? Investors said the market was saturated and that their concept was good but too common. Carla felt trapped in a cycle of failed attempts, until, during a work trip, something inexplicable happened. She was in the lobby of a hotel, waiting for a customer, when a man she had never seen before approached and said, "Don't fear change. The originality you seek is already within you, but you need to let go of the old to embrace the new." Before Carla could ask anything, he disappeared into the crowd. Those words were engraved in his mind. For weeks, she reevaluated her operations and realized she was stuck with old methods, afraid of risking something new. He decided to reformulate the entire concept of his restaurant, investing in technology and sustainability. It wasn't easy at first, but over time, she not only attracted new customers, but also gained investors interested in the innovation she offered. Carla never met that man again, but deep down, she knew he wasn't just a stranger. He was a messenger sent to help her. And there is also the story of Jorge, owner of a small furniture factory, who was facing an emotional impasse. He had talent and skill, but he couldn't see the value in himself or his products. Jorge was a man of faith, but over time, the weight of financial difficulties had weakened his prayers. One morning, while opening his factory, he felt a different presence. Something made him look towards the oldest corner of the shed, where he found a piece of wood that had been discarded. At this moment he heard a voice, as clear as the sound of a person next to him, saying, "What is rejected by many can be transformed into something unique." Taken by that feeling of something bigger, Jorge took that piece of wood and decided to create a unique piece, with no intention of selling it. The result was a handmade chair so beautiful that it caught the attention of an influential customer who was visiting his factory. This client not only purchased the chair, but also hired Jorge to develop an entire line based on exclusivity and the reuse of materials. The business that was on the verge of collapse became a model of success, and a reference in sustainability. These reports are not just success stories. They remind us that there are dimensions of wisdom and guidance beyond what our eyes can see. These angels, messengers of God, did not appear to these business people as a magical solution, but as guides to help them see what they could not see on their own. They brought clarity amid chaos, courage in times of uncertainty, a new vision to challenges that seemed insurmountable. And perhaps what impacts us most when hearing these stories is realizing that these divine interventions are not reserved for a few. They are available to everyone who is open to listening, who believes in the impossible, and who, even in the midst of the biggest storms, can still look up and ask, "What's the next step, sir?" Now I ask you, which angels might be trying to speak to you today? What messages have you ignored out of fear, doubt, or simply because you think you are not worthy of receiving something so great? If you are facing challenges in your company, in your dreams, or in your own life, remember, you are not alone. Just like Marcos, Carla, and Jorge, you can also find guidance beyond the natural, answers that will not only transform your business, but also your story. Stay strong. The next meeting may be closer than you think. What fascinates me most about these stories is how divine intervention manifests itself in such unexpected ways. Think about the case of Renata, an entrepreneur who had founded a technology startup. During the first few months, everything seemed to be going well. Investors were excited and the team was motivated. But over time, the euphoria gave way to pressure and fatigue. The metrics were not growing as expected, and investors began to doubt the business's potential. Renata, who has always been a woman of faith, felt lost. Her prayers seemed to echo in the void, and the fear of failure began to take over her. Then, one night, something unusual happened. Renata was on her balcony, looking at the sky, when an intense light caught her attention. It wasn't just the light of a star or a distant plane. It was something different, something she described as a glow that seemed to speak to the heart. Suddenly, a soft but firm voice said, "Renata, you were called to create something that connects people, but you're trying to solve problems that don't belong to you. Go back to the essence of what moved you in the first place." At that moment, an indescribable peace came over her. Renata knew exactly what to do. She called her team in the next day and completely overhauled the product, focusing on simplicity and the true mission that had inspired her from the beginning, creating human connections through technology. The result? In less than 6 months, the startup recovered its momentum and investors began to believe again. Renata knew that that glow and those words were not the result of her imagination, but a divine gift to guide her on the right path. And what about the story of Paul? He owned a construction company that, despite having an excellent track record, was facing a major dilemma. A multi-million-dollar project was about to be launched, but a series of complications with suppliers and permits threatened to delay everything. The delay meant gigantic losses, something that could compromise not only the future of the company, but also the stability of the families of the employees who depended on it. Paulo was always a methodical and rational man, but in that situation he felt powerless. He sought advice from experts, hired consultants, but nothing seemed to work. Desperate, he decided to take a weekend to rest and reflect. He went on a spiritual retreat, something he hadn't done in years, and there, during a quiet moment, it happened. He had a vision. An angel, dressed in white, appeared and said something simple but profound. "Paulo, trust those you have ignored. Your answers are closer than you think." When he returned to the office, those words still echoed in his mind. He started talking to his employees, especially those who rarely had a say in strategic decisions. To their surprise, a young engineer, who had recently been hired, came up with an innovative idea that not only solved the problem, but also saved money and time. Paolo realized he was so focused on looking for big answers that he ignored the power of simple solutions. The project was delivered on time, and he never underestimated the importance of listening and trusting his team. These accounts have something in common. Change begins with an openness to the unknown. We all face moments when it feels like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. At these times, it's easy to believe we're alone, but the truth is, we never are. God uses his angels in ways that we don't always immediately understand, but that lead us to results we could never imagine achieving on our own. Often, what we need is not more work, more effort, or more analysis. We need clarity, a divine touch that shows us what really matters. And when we make space for this, the results are not limited to material success. They transform our vision of life, connect us with something greater, and teach us to walk with faith, even in the storms. Now I ask you, what would your life, your company be like if you made space to hear these messages? Have you ever felt at any point that something bigger was trying to guide you? Maybe through a dream, a person who crossed your path, or even a strong intuition that you can't explain. If so, know that this is no coincidence. It's an invitation for you to look beyond the obvious and trust. And remember, angels don't just appear for great business people or in extreme situations. They may be taking action right now, in the small details of your day, just waiting for you to pay attention and take the next step with confidence. Are you willing to listen? And when you start listening, something extraordinary happens. Take the case of Fernanda, owner of a chain of furniture stores. For years, her business prospered without any major difficulties, but as time went by, sales began to decline. Competition was fierce, and the pandemic made the situation even worse. Fernanda tried everything: promotions, aggressive advertising campaigns, even changes to the product line. But nothing seemed to work. Debts began to pile up, and for the first time, she considered closing her doors. One night, exhausted and not knowing what to do, she knelt in her living room and prayed. His words were simple but full of emotion. God, show me a way. I don't know what else to do. After a few minutes of silence, Fernanda felt a peace that she hadn't felt in months. And then, something unexpected happened. While she was sleeping, she had a dream. In the dream, a man in a white robe, which radiated light, handed her a small book. He didn't say a word, but pointed to a specific page. When she opened it, there was a single sentence: "Give space to what you don't know yet." When Fernanda woke up, she was intrigued. She couldn't forget that dream. For weeks, he tried to understand the meaning of the message. Until, at a business event, she met a young digital marketing specialist, something she had never considered as a priority. Inspired by the message of the dream, Fernanda decided to follow this path. He hired the young man's team, and in a few months, his company underwent a complete digital transformation. Online sales soared, and she was able to reach audiences that were previously out of her reach. Fernanda knew that dream was more than a manifestation of the mind. It was divine guidance that opened her eyes to see a solution that was beyond her traditional field of vision. Today, she tells this story to other entrepreneurs, always highlighting the importance of listening and trusting signals that often arrive when we least expect them. Another impressive example is that of Ricardo, who inherited a printing business from his family. The company had been in operation for decades, but the graphics market has undergone major changes in recent years. Many clients migrated to digital solutions, and Ricardo found himself with expensive machines and little work. He knew he needed a reinvention, but he couldn't find a way out. Pressure from employees and families suffocated him, and he began to doubt his own ability to lead. One morning, while walking through a park, Ricardo stopped to rest on a bench. He was deep in thought when an elderly woman approached. Without him saying a word, she looked at him and said, "You are carrying more weight than you should. Some things need to be left behind for others to flourish." Surprised, Ricardo tried to ask what she meant, but the woman just smiled, touched his shoulder, and walked away. Those words stayed in Ricardo's mind for days. He finally understood that he was trying to keep the business stuck in the past, in family traditions, without considering what the market really needed now. With this in mind, he sold some of his old equipment and invested in a new production line, specializing in sustainable packaging, something in high demand. In less than a year, the printing company not only recovered its financial health, but also won an award for innovation in the sector. Ricardo believes that that woman was an angel sent to open his eyes. And even though it disappeared as quickly as it came, he feels gratitude every day for that brief but powerful intervention. These stories show something we often ignore. The answers we seek are not just in numbers, plans, or constant efforts. They come from the moment we decide to trust in something bigger. It doesn't matter the size of the problem or the severity of the situation. There is always a way out, and it often comes through a message that touches the heart directly. And you? Can you remember a time when an unexpected message changed everything? Maybe you haven't realized it yet, but it could be that divine guidance has already appeared in your life, and you haven't yet given it due attention. Or perhaps this guidance is coming to you right now as you reflect on these stories. The fact is that God and His angels leave no one behind. They are by our side, willing to help, to show the way, as long as we are open to listening. The question that remains is, are you ready to put aside doubt and allow this greater force to guide your decisions? If the answer is yes, know that the first step is always simple: trust. And as we continue this journey of inspiring stories, we realize that the action of angels is not limited to dramatic moments or situations of extreme despair. Sometimes their messages come as a whisper, a simple encouragement for us to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. Take the case of Leticia, a young entrepreneur who opened a small cafe in her hometown. Leticia's dream has always been to create a welcoming space where people feel at home. But over time, financial difficulties and the pressure to attract more customers began to turn this dream into a nightmare. Leticia felt that the coffee was losing its essence. Her greatest anguish was that, despite all her effort, she was unable to connect with people in the way she always imagined. One night, while cleaning the cafe hall alone, she heard a song playing on the radio, something that seemed distant yet deeply familiar. The lyrics talked about serving others with love and leaving your mark on the world through simple gestures. At that moment, Leticia felt a presence beside her, as if someone was saying, "Get back to what really matters." The next day, when opening the cafe, Leticia decided to make a simple but significant change. She started writing inspiring messages on cups and napkins, phrases of affection, motivation, little reminders that people were not alone. She had no idea how this would impact her clients, but something inside her told her it was the right thing to do. The result was surprising. Customers began sharing these messages on social media, and Leticia's cafe became known as a place of welcoming and positivity. People from all over the city started coming to the space, looking not only for a good coffee, but also for a daily dose of hope. Leticia realized that by rescuing her company's original purpose, she not only saved the business, but also found a way to touch people's lives. These reports show us that angels often do not speak with words or grandiose appearances. Your messages can be in a song, in an unexpected encounter, or even in a dream. The secret is to be attentive and open to recognizing these signs. Now, think about the case of Mauricio, owner of a small construction company. For years, he led modest but successful projects building homes in suburban neighborhoods. Mauricio was known for his ethics and commitment, but with rising costs and bureaucracy, he began to face difficulties. His company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and he didn't know what to do to save what took years to build. One night, while organizing the papers on his desk, Mauricio found an old Bible that had belonged to his grandfather. Inside it, there was a note on a specific page in the book of Proverbs: "With wisdom, a house is built, and with understanding, it is established." Mauricio felt as if those words were directed at him at that moment. Inspired by the passage, he began to reflect on what really made a difference to his customers. He realized that it wasn't just about building houses, but offering something that helped people make their dreams come true. He decided to adapt his company to offer sustainable housing projects, with more affordable costs and a greater focus on family well-being. In a short time, the Mauritius Construction Company became a reference in the sector, with customers praising its transparency and attention to detail. He always attributed this change to the message he found in that Bible, believing that God had used that moment to guide his choices. These stories are not just about business success, they are about the transformation that occurs when we allow something greater to guide us. They are reminders that even in the midst of the greatest difficulties, there is always a light that shows us the way. Now think about your own life. Have you ever received a sign that, due to doubt or distraction, you missed? Could it be that, at this very moment, a message is trying to reach you, just asking you to stop and listen? Remember that angels don't just act to solve material problems. They show us ways to live with purpose, with joy, and with faith. And when we are open to receive, the changes that occur go far beyond what we imagine. Vitoria's story is another fascinating example of how angels can act directly, bringing clarity and strength in times of uncertainty. Vitoria was a partner in a technology company that developed applications for small businesses. She and her business partner, Raphael, worked tirelessly but struggled to win bigger contracts and expand the company. Despite countless attempts, it seemed like all the doors were closing. On an intense night of work, Vitoria felt a different kind of tiredness, something that seemed more mental than physical. He decided to go out for some air and went to a park close to the office. As she walked alone, she felt a gentle wind and heard a sentence clearly in her mind: "Stop looking outside and start looking within." That made her stop immediately. She looked around, but there was no one around. Back in the office, the words kept echoing in his mind: "Look in." She sat down, grabbed a piece of paper, and started writing down everything that came to mind. At that moment, he realized that the company was trying to compete in a saturated market instead of focusing on the true talent they had, customizing solutions for each client. The next morning, he shared this idea with Raphael. The two decided to completely change the company's approach. Instead of offering ready-made packages, they began creating applications that met each customer's specific needs. This change attracted immediate attention, and within a few months, the company began working with major brands, looking for unique and personalized solutions. Vitoria firmly believed that that apparently simple phrase was a gift from an angel that helped her regain the focus and vision of her company. Another powerful example is that of Cesar, a businessman who inherited a family furniture factory. The company had prospered for decades, but over time it faced serious financial problems due to competition from cheaper imported furniture. Cesar felt the weight of maintaining the family legacy, but was unable to find a viable solution to save the business. One night, while organizing old documents at his parents' house, he found a notebook with notes from his grandfather, who had founded the factory. Among the scribbles, a sentence caught his attention: "The value is in the story, not just the product." These words seemed to ignite something inside Caesar. The next day, he decided to start a marketing project that highlighted the history of each piece produced by the factory. He included details about the artisanal process, the care with materials, and the history of the family that gave life to those creations. The impact was immediate. Customers began to value not only the furniture, but also the story behind it. The company started to sell pieces as unique works of art at a fair but competitive price. Caesar told everyone that that notebook was not found by chance. For him, his grandfather still took care of the company in a mysterious but always present way. These stories reveal something profound. Angels are at our side not only to rescue us from extreme situations, but also to help us see what is often before our eyes and we cannot see. They remind us of our own strengths, talents, and values, which may lie dormant or forgotten amid daily challenges. Now, I want you to reflect. In your trajectory, what do you feel you may be neglecting? Any ideas you had and didn't pay attention to? Any intuition that you dismissed as a simple thought? Remember, divine messages can come in unexpected ways. A chance encounter, a phrase in a book, or even a dream you barely remember when you wake up. The important thing is to be receptive. Often, what seems like a small insight can be the key to opening doors you never imagined. Another impressive story is that of Bianca, owner of a coffee shop chain that was facing a critical moment. Bianca had built her business based on her passion for artisanal coffee and the experience she wanted to provide to her customers. During the first few years, the venture grew rapidly, but with the arrival of major competitors and changes in consumer habits, sales began to plummet. She tried everything: promotions, store remodeling, staff training, but nothing seemed to work. Exhausted and on the verge of giving up, Bianca decided to take a break. One weekend, he went to a small country house where he used to go when he was a child. That night, as he watched the stars, he felt a calm, comforting presence. In his heart, he heard a soft voice say, "Go back to your roots." Initially, she didn't understand what that meant, but when he recalled how the business began, he realized that he had moved away from the essence that made his coffee special: human connection. The following Monday, Bianca called a meeting with her team and announced that they would transform the company's approach. Coffee shops would no longer be just a place to buy coffee and would become social spaces. She began organizing cultural events, such as small live music shows, poetry readings, and gatherings of local entrepreneurs. Furthermore, it revived the concept of storytelling, telling the story of each type of coffee served and the origin of its beans. The impact was surprising. Old customers returned and brought friends, enchanted by the unique experience the coffee shops offered. It didn't take long for sales to increase significantly, and most importantly, Bianca regained the joy of leading her business. Bianca believed that voice was the manifestation of an angel, a reminder that true prosperity is rooted in what connects us with our original purpose. Another striking case is that of Roberto, owner of a construction company that almost went bankrupt during an economic crisis. Roberto has always been a pragmatic man who based all his decisions on numbers and statistics. When the crisis hit the construction sector, he cut costs, laid off employees, and tried to renegotiate contracts, but debts continued to grow. One sleepless night, while analyzing the numbers, he felt an inexplicable urge to open an old book that he had received from his father, but that he had never read. Leafing through the book, he found a bookmark in an excerpt that said, "Build with purpose, not just with bricks." These words impacted him deeply. Roberto began to reflect on how his company could differentiate itself. In the following days, he decided to invest in projects aimed at sustainable and affordable construction, something that was scarce on the market. He gathered the remaining team and explained his vision: to create homes that were more than structures, but that truly changed people's lives. The transition was not easy, but the result was transformative. He secured partnerships with environmental organizations and government funding. Customers began to value his company's ethics and innovation, which not only saved the business, but led to exponential growth. Roberto recognized that that moment was the turning point in his life. He came to believe that the message found in the book was a gift from an angel, guiding him to build something greater than himself. Stories like these show us that angels often invite us to reclaim our authenticity and align our work with a greater purpose. They not only point out practical solutions, but also help us rediscover the meaning behind what we do. And you? Have you ever had a moment when you felt like you were guided by something bigger? Maybe a sign, a word, or even a simple thought that completely changed the course of your life. Remember, angels are always nearby, ready to show us the way. All we need is to be open to listening. Another inspiring case is that of Eduardo, a businessman in the technology sector who was experiencing an ethical dilemma. He founded his startup with the mission of creating digital solutions that make people's lives easier. However, as the company grew, investors began to pressure him to focus solely on profit, even if that meant releasing lower quality products or changing contracts in ways that favored the company but harmed customers. Eduardo felt divided. On the one hand, he wanted to maintain his integrity and loyalty to the startup's initial purpose. On the other hand, he feared that, without following investors' recommendations, his company would go bankrupt. One morning, while working alone in the office, he felt a presence in the room, something that, for him, was not visible, but deeply real. Closing his eyes, Eduardo felt a peace he hadn't experienced in months. He heard a clear message: trust is your greatest currency. Protect it at any cost. The next day, he decided to follow this advice, even if it was against the advice of his investors. Eduardo took steps to strengthen trust with his customers, improving technical support and ensuring full transparency in the services offered. He even published a public manifesto declaring that his company's mission would never be sacrificed for a quick profit. At first, the reaction was one of disbelief, and some investors decided to withdraw. But to his surprise, the public began to react in an extraordinary way. Customers who felt safe began recommending the company to friends and family. Renowned organizations have highlighted your startup as an example of business ethics. In a few months, Eduardo attracted new investors more aligned with his values, and his startup achieved success that he had never imagined. He had no doubt that the message he heard that night came from an angel, helping him to see that trust is the foundation of any lasting business. Another moving testimony is that of Camila, owner of a book publishing company. Camila has always loved literature and believed in the transformative power of stories. However, in a market increasingly dominated by large corporations and digital consumption, his small publisher was finding it difficult to compete. Sales were low, and she was starting to consider closing her doors. One night, while reviewing a manuscript that had just arrived, a phrase caught his attention: "The light shines brightest in the darkness." Upon reading these words, she felt an inexplicable warmth in her chest, as if she were being hugged. Camila took this as a sign that she shouldn't give up, but rather find a way to make her publisher stand out amid adversity. Inspired by this experience, Camila decided to transform her publishing house into a space dedicated to unknown authors, giving them a platform to share their stories. In addition, it began organizing literary events in underserved communities, encouraging reading and promoting local writers. The impact was transformative, People began to connect deeply with the publisher's mission. Independent bookstores started to support the project, and partnerships with schools and libraries strengthened the brand's presence. Camilla not only saved her company, but also discovered an even greater purpose in her work. For her, that moment of inspiration was a clear example of divine intervention. The phrase she read in the manuscript, added to the feeling of welcome she felt, was confirmation that an angel was guiding her to continue fighting for her passion and purpose. These accounts teach us that even in the darkest hours, the light of angels can illuminate us and show us a path that we may never have imagined on our own. They remind us that true prosperity is rooted in the alignment between our values and our actions, and that when we listen and follow these signs, great miracles can happen. Another impressive report comes from Roberto, owner of a restaurant chain who was facing serious financial problems. He had invested everything he had in the business, but a series of strategic mistakes and economic crises put the company in a critical situation. His suppliers began to cut services due to lack of payment, customers were decreasing, and Roberto felt he had lost control of everything. One night, after a particularly difficult day, Roberto decided to walk through the park near his house to try to organize his thoughts. As he reflected, with tears streaming down his face, he heard a soft, reassuring voice in his mind. Remember the flavor of your mission. Rekindle the spice of passion. At first, he thought he was imagining things, but those words repeated in his mind throughout the night. Roberto knew that this was no coincidence. He decided to interpret them as a message sent by an angel and began to reflect on the original purpose of his restaurants. He realized that in the beginning, his greatest passion was offering unique experiences through food, creating dishes that told stories and brought people together. Over time, the search for efficiency and profit had made him lose this essence. The message he heard inspired him to renew his commitment to his original mission. The next day, Roberto gathered his team and shared his experience. He asked everyone to work together to reimagine the menu, focusing on dishes that have an emotional connection with diners. Additionally, he began organizing theme nights and community events at his restaurants, strengthening ties with the local community. The transformation was surprising. Old customers returned to frequent the restaurants, attracted by the authenticity and human warmth that now appeared in every detail. The new approach also attracted local media attention, generating positive publicity and increasing customer flow. Roberto believes that if he hadn't heard that angelic message that night, he might have given up on everything. He found the strength to start over, reconnecting with the passion that drove him to open the restaurants in the first place. Stories like this show that angels not only offer practical advice, but they also help us remember who we really are and what we want to create in the world. Another striking example is that of Paula, a fashion designer who struggled to stand out in a saturated market. Paula had talent and creativity, but faced difficulties finding an audience that truly valued her work. Feeling invisible and unmotivated, she thought about giving up her career. One night, while sewing a piece for a client, she began to cry, asking God for guidance. Suddenly, he felt a light breeze pass through the room and heard a voice in his mind. "Clothe the world with your truth, and it will recognize your light." These words echoed in his soul. The next day, Paula started working on a collection inspired by her own roots and personal stories. She used fabrics, colors, and patterns that reflected her culture and life experiences, something she had always been hesitant to do for fear of not pleasing the market. The collection was an instant success. People began sharing on social media how much the pieces resonated with their own stories. A well-known influencer praised the authenticity of Paula's work, which further boosted her visibility. Today, Paula has an established brand and is an inspiration for other artists. She always mentions that that night of angelic intervention was the turning point in her career and life. These reports reveal a pattern. When we allow ourselves to hear messages from angels, we find the courage to act in ways that are aligned with our essence and purpose. No matter the size of the challenge, there is always a path to the light, and the angels are always ready to guide us there. Another fascinating case is that of Eduardo, an entrepreneur in the technology sector who was in charge of an innovative startup. Eduardo's company had been founded with the aim of revolutionizing the way small businesses manage their inventories. The project started well, but over time, fierce competition and pressure for results caused it to lose direction. Eduardo was exhausted, emotionally worn out, and felt that failure was imminent. One night, after another frustrating day, he sat in his empty office. It was late, and the darkness of the environment reflected his inner state. He closed his eyes and, almost in a whisper, asked God for help. It was then that he felt an inexplicable presence, as if someone was there with him. There were no noises or supernatural phenomena, but Eduardo felt a peace he hadn't experienced in months. Suddenly he had a clear vision in his mind. A tree loaded with fruit, but with roots that were suffocated. He heard an inner voice that said, "Unburden its roots and allow the tree to bloom in due time." The vision was symbolic, but Eduardo immediately understood the meaning. He had tried to expand his company so quickly that he hadn't taken the time to build a solid foundation. Its roots, the company's core values and connection with its audience, were compromised. The next day, Eduardo gathered his team and decided it was time to reformulate the company's strategy. He prioritized customer feedback, adjusted focus to deliver simpler, more effective solutions, and invested in strengthening the organization's internal culture. Instead of expanding quickly, he chose to grow sustainably. The results were transformative. Customers began to trust the company more, and word of mouth generated organic growth that no expensive advertising campaign had achieved. The startup became an example of balanced innovation, and Eduardo was invited to speak about his journey. He always attributes the company's rebirth to that spiritual experience and the advice he received that night. Another impressive story is that of Mariana, a talented baker who struggled to maintain her small business amidst growing competition. Although she was passionate about her work, the bills were piling up, and she was beginning to question whether she should continue. Mariana shares that during a dream, an angel appeared to her in the form of a bright and serene figure. He was holding a tray full of sweets, and as he handed it to Mariana, he said, "Sweetness attracts abundance, but sincerity is the secret ingredient." She woke up with those words etched in her mind. At first, he didn't understand what it meant, but he decided to reflect on the message. Little by little, he realized that his business needed something more authentic to stand out. It was then that she began to share her personal story behind each recipe, showing how each sweet carried memories and emotions from her life. Mariana also started organizing small events in her store where customers could learn how to make sweets while listening to her stories. This created such a deep connection that his clientele multiplied. A video of one of these events went viral, and in a few months, Mariana became a reference in artisanal confectionery in the region. She believes that without that angelic message, she might never have discovered the true difference of her business. Today, Mariana says that her recipes are not just made of ingredients, but also of faith, love, and authenticity. These stories, although unique, have something in common. They show that in the most challenging moments, angels help us remember who we are and give us the courage to walk a true and purposeful path.